Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. Over the past several years, the designers of the game have been remastering their older structure decks, and for good or ill, they've had massive impacts on the game. The Monarch structure deck introduced a whole new generation of players to the joys of locking out the extra deck. The Magician structure deck brought Endymion back into competitive viability, and countless other structures were ripped apart and used as pack filler in booster sets. God, I hate this game sometimes. But the original versions of the deck have had their place in Yu-Gi-Oh's history as well. For instance, the original Monarch structure deck introduced Caius, which was the premium piece of removal back in the day. And while the old Magician structure deck didn't rock the world, the introduction of Fortress brought about the advent of a new wave of value-focused machine decks. But the one that sticks out in my mind the most was the old Dark World structure deck, meant to bolster the power of this theme that premiered in the November 2005 core set, Elemental Energy. It was annoying to deal with back in the day, but it did teach me a whole lot of valuable lessons. I was on Gladiator Beast at the time, and I'll admit I showed a lot of ignorance thinking you could War Chariot the graveyard summoning of Grapha, not knowing it was less of an activated effect and more of a summon condition, and thinking Shadow Imprisoning Mirror could keep that lockdown as well for the same reason. And for as meaningful as it was for me, I can't imagine what it must have been like for the Silva fans out there to have some premium support. And it looks like they're going to be riding that high once again, because Dark Worlds are next up on the remaster schedule. There's another highly anticipated structure deck on the horizon as well, and we'll get to that soon, but for now, we'll be focusing on this fan favorite from beyond the veil of the world of light. Let's take a look at this and see what discard does, find out how they play in the yard, then see if there are any other dark denizens that can dispatch despair upon our opponents. It's time to delve into the Dark World. But before we continue, a quick reminder to please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed my content so far. We're on the road to 100,000 subscribers, and there's no better way to get there than on our duel runners. Our next stop is 40k, which means Leo and Luna Explained, where we'll be covering Ancient Fairy Dragon's companions, the Power Tool Dragons, Morphtronics, and any other cards that are more than meets the eye. We've also got our Discord, where, cubes. I also have a Twitch where you can join me for viewer duels, progression polls pulls, and chaos draft pulls for the foreseeable future. And don't forget about my Patreon, where you can gain access to my videos early, reach some of these milestones, as well as helping to determine which videos I make. Thank you all so much for watching, and now, back to the video. So what's the deal with Dark Worlds? Well, they're a series of dark fiend monsters who thrive on discarding. In fact, it's kind of the earliest instance of a deck leaning on this, and was likely made as a response to powerful early hand control cards like Confiscation and Delinquent Duo. Now, because of that, it's inherited a lot of drawbacks of older design, mainly that they only work when discarded by a card effect, which is in contrast to Dangers, who just care about being discarded, period. However, because of this, they have a wonderful way of turning effects that would otherwise be an even trade, or even a minus, into a more advantageous usage of card economy. Also, they're all named after a color. Look, just because you're a Legion of Demons does not give you an excuse to slack on your color palettes. Let's start by categorizing the monsters that make our discards a disaster. At least for our opponents. Ceruli, Guru of Dark World, is a level 1 monster with 100 attack and 300 defense. And if this card is discarded to the grave by a card effect, you special summon this card from the grave to your opponent's side of the field in face-up defense position. When this card is special summoned by the effect of a Dark World card, your opponent must discard a card. We haven't gotten to these cards yet, but a variety of our Dark Worlds gain an extra effect if discarded by our opponent's effect. And since a lot of hand rip has either been banned or left by the wayside, those effects will hardly see any usage without a little extra coaxing. And that's what Ceruli is here for. By discarding it, your opponent will be forced to receive this wise gremlin who will force you, the owner, to discard any cards you want for maximum value. However, because you need to set up the right card in hand to make use of this, Ceruli is usually played as a one-of so you can search it once you're ready. It's a pretty powerful guru, but as far as the category goes, well, let's just say they haven't gotten to the point where they have a deck named after them. Pearl, Hermit of Dark World, is a level 1 monster with 300 attack and 100 defense, and if this card is discarded by a card effect, you can target a Dark World monster in your grave and special summon it to either field. Then, if this card was discarded from your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, you can special summon one of your fiends that are banished, or in your hand or grave as well. This is kind of like an extension of Ceruli. It makes it so you still only have to play the one, and if Ceruli ends up getting stuck in your grave, Pearl can summon it to your opponent's field as well. And if you don't have that setup, then you can just pivot to getting a free Dark World, no big deal. Heck, it can even double up on its trigger if it was discarded by something like Cerulei, which I think is just fantastic, making this a fine pearl of power. Gren, Tactician of Darkworld, is a level 2 monster with 300 attack and 500 defense, and if this card is discarded by a card effect, you can target a spell or trap card on the field and destroy it. That's a little bare bones on the surface, which is why we're also going to take a look at their counterpart, Khaki, Gorilla of Darkworld, who has the same stats and trigger, but destroys a monster on the field instead. Notably, both of these are mandatory effects, so if your opponent doesn't have a legal target, you're going to have to resolve it by hitting one of your own cards, which is kind of funny. It's also probably part of the reason they don't see play. Generally, you want to focus on the Dark Worlds that'll give you guaranteed value, because that's part of the reason you're even playing the deck in the first place, so whiffing on these two feels pretty bad. But since the color combination of green and khaki isn't really my thing, I'm not too torn up about it. Scar, Scout of Darkworld, is a level 2 monster with 500 attack and defense that does not have an effect that triggers on discard. Instead, when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the grave, you can add a level 4 or lower Darkworld monster from your deck to your hand, which sets up some discard effects. But the on-battle destruction requirement makes this card basically unplayable, and this does really tear me up because red is one of my favorite colors. Brow, Huntsman of Darkworld, is a level 3 monster with 1400 attack and 800 defense, and if this card is discarded by a card effect, you draw a card, plus another card if this card was discarded from your hand to the grave by an opponent's card effect. This makes for a very good way to cycle through your deck as a way to make up for minuses, and its stat line actually makes it so Tour Guide is a great inclusion to help make some rank 3s. It also gets bonus points from me because it's already got a pun all loaded up on it. You know, because in the process of firing it, you have to draw your bowstring. Beige, Vanguard of Darkworld, is a level 4 monster with 1600 attack and 1300 defense, and if this card is discarded to the grave by a card effect, special summon this card from your grave. A deceptively powerful effect, a good combo line will see you discarding, summoning, bouncing, and discarding this card again and again to provide you with more bodies to set up your board. So anyone who thinks beige is boring is gonna be in for a massive wake-up call. Alright, now that we're talking about level 4s, we do need to get these two out of the way. Renge, Gatekeeper of Darkworld, is a level 4 monster with 100 attack and 2100 defense. His renowned athletic physique has made him famous with the populace of Darkworld. They call him Iron Wall Renge because no one can break through his incredible defenses. On the other side of the battle stat spectrum, Jur, Knight of Darkworld, is a level 4 monster with 1800 attack and 1500 defense. The name of this illustrious knight is known by all residents of Darkworld. He never oppresses the commoners. That's right, our big discard deck has vanilla monsters in it, which I guess is okay. It's nice to have some cards with reliable stats to provide some stability. You could have stapled those onto effect monsters that actually do something, but I digress. It also paints the Dark World with a bit more humanity than their appearance would lead you to believe, giving their major players nicknames and spreading their word throughout the land. Though it could mean that Jur is an exception, am I going to have to start getting invested in Dark World lore? Braun, Mad King of Darkworld, is a level 4 monster with 1800 attack and 400 defense, and is one of the Dark Worlds that does not have an on-discard effect. Rather, when this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you discard a card. So it's something of a discard enabler strapped onto a decently sized normal summon. Unfortunately, its power level isn't in line with its name. While it does have some stiff competition, it's nowhere near first place, and thus doesn't get the bronze medal. Genta, Gateman of Darkworld, is a level 4 monster with 1000 attack and 1800 defense. This is another Dark World that doesn't have a discard trigger, rather it discards as cost for its own effect, adding the field spell the Gates of Darkworld from your deck to your hand. And if this card is banished and you control a Dark World card, you can special summon this card. This is an extremely powerful card because it basically sets up everything you need to deploy Gates of Darkworld and gives you an extra monster to use on top of it. However, it does mean that the deck has given up any chance of being likable because no one likes a Gatekeeper. Snow, Unlight of Darkworld, is a level 4 monster with 1700 attack and 0 defense, and if this card is discarded to the grave by a card effect, you add a Dark World card from your deck to your hand. And if your opponent caused the discard, you can target a monster in your opponent's grave and special summon it to your field in face-up defense position. This is already a really strong card just for the Surge effect, but if for some reason you trigger this off of Cerulei or some other kind of discard effect from your opponent, you'll be snagging a free monster from them, whose power level can vary depending on the matchup, but the floor is still getting a free monster, so it's hard to complain. Now, if someone could tell me what an Unlight is, I'd super appreciate it. Gold, Lord of Darkworld is a level 5 monster with 2300 attack and 1400 defense, and if this card is discarded to the grave by a card effect, you can special summon this card. And if discarded by an opponent's effect, you can target up to 2 cards your opponent controls and destroy them. Wow, now that's some value. Worst case scenario, you get a big body, and best case, it's also an Icarus attack. Similarly, Silva, Warlord of Darkworld, has the same stats and trigger, also is special summoned if discarded by an effect, and if it's your opponent who discarded this, your opponent returns exactly 2 cards from their hand to the bottom of their deck in any order. These serve a similar function to Beige, though they don't have the option of being normal summoned without a tribute. However, the Lords have much stronger attack for breaking boards. You might not want to run 3 copies of each, and whichever one you choose will depend on what's more important in a given format. Though it's hard to argue with a card that gives you free removal. And you know, because gold is the superior color. Latinum, Exarch of Darkworld, is a level 6 monster with 1500 attack and 2400 defense, and if this card is discarded to the grave by a card effect, you special summon this card. And if it was discarded by your opponent's effect, you can target a fiend monster and it gains a permanent 500 attack boost. Wow, I mean, this is basically another version of Gold and Silva, but its offensive stats are much worse. However, that doesn't mean it's a strict downgrade. It has a bigger level, allowing for rank 6 plays, or it can help you get different synchros with the right tuner. But the bonus effect is absolutely not worth it. It does, however, look the coolest. This thing has a skull made of 2 skulls! How wicked is that? Lucent, Netherlord of Darkworld, is a level 6 monster with 2400 attack and 0 defense, and if this card is discarded by a card effect, you can special summon this card from the grave. Then, if this card was discarded from the hand to the grave by an opponent's effect, you can special summon a fiend monster from your deck to either side of the field. Ooh, fun! Another way to trigger Cerule. It's even better at enabling rank 6 plays than Exarch because there's the chance you can summon another copy of itself if your opponent discards this. Though, since it can summon any fiend, the possibilities are endless. But once your opponent knows what you're up to, they'll be able to see through your plans. Reign-Beaux, Overlord of Darkworld, is a level 7 monster with 2500 attack and 1800 defense, and if this card is discarded by an opponent's card effect, special summon this card from the grave. And when this card is special summoned this way, destroy all monsters your opponent controls, or all spells and traps they control. You'll note that this doesn't trigger when discarded by any card effect, it has to be your opponent's. With cards like Cerule, and a few we'll talk about in a bit, this has become easier to pull off, but not by much. It's once again one of those situations, like Grenin Khaki, that it requires just the right setup, which you can't account for all the time. Which is a real shame since it's basically a better lightning storm when triggered. And you know, it's just like the establishment to treat the gayest Darkworld monster like this. It's literally the embodiment of God gave me anxiety because he knew that if I didn't have to obsess over every little discard trigger, that I'd get too powerful. Grapha, Dragonlord of Darkworld, is a level 8 monster with 2700 attack and 1800 defense, and you can special summon this card from your grave by returning any Darkworld monster you control to the hand, except a copy of itself. If this card is discarded to the grave by a card effect, you target a card your opponent controls and destroy that target. Then, if this card was discarded from your hand to the grave by an opponent's card effect, look at a random card in their hand, and if it's a monster, special summon it to your side of the field. Yeah, I bet even if you're familiar with this big bad Broodlord, you didn't remember that part of the effect. I sure didn't. But yeah, introducing Grapha, the headliner for the first Darkworld structure deck, and boy howdy did it give the deck a lot of potential. While it's been noted that, at the time, Darkworld wasn't actually stronger than the top decks running the format, Darkworld's massive representation was a testament to just how far a reasonably powerful $10 structure deck can galvanize a player base that otherwise wouldn't be competing. And don't let those reports fool you, this card is still very, very powerful. Its removal on discard and interacts very well with Beige. If it's discarded, you get Beige back onto the field, which you can then bounce to your hand to get Grapha, which can then be discarded later to put a free monster on board to bounce a Grapha back. This was ridiculously powerful as is, being able to reborn a gigantic beater every turn unless it got banished, but as the years have gone by and more compatible extra deck summons have been unleashed, this has turned into the boss monster that keeps on giving. Heck, it's so strong it got Firewall banned, being the repeatable tribute fodder Cannon Soldier needed for FTKs. And that's not even getting into how well this interacts with the Virus Trap cards. Grapha is an extremely powerful monster, held back only because the theme it's tied to just hasn't had very many opportunities to break into the competitive meta. But I expect this is going to change really soon, based on this Grapha But that was the old structure deck, which means we need a modern twist on the classic flavor, and that's where Reign-Beaux, Supreme Overlord of Darkworld, comes in. They're a level 8 monster with 3000 attack and 1800 defense, and you can special summon this card from the grave like Grapha by returning a level 7 or lower Darkworld monster you control to the hand. If this card is discarded by a card effect, you can add a level 5 or higher Darkworld monster from your deck to your hand, except a copy of itself. Then, if this card was discarded from your hand to the grave by an opponent's effect, you can special summon a level 4 or lower Darkworld monster from your deck or grave to either field. I expect that last effect will also not be seen very often, but its regular on discard effect is looking pretty stacked. Snow can already search anything that Supreme Reign-Beaux can, but that frees up Snow's search for a variety of other cards, while Supreme gets Grapha, or any of the Darkworld lords. And it's just as repeatably recyclable as Grapha, bouncing back Darkworlds to get a 3000 body on board, whose 8 stars pair very nicely with Grapha's to make rank 8 exceeds. I hear Zombie Stein is a little underutilized, and aside from that, the rank 8 pool is no stranger to great utility effects with amazing stats. So enjoy your wealth of new options, Darkworld players, and play the deck with pride. But was that enough? Absolutely not, because now the previous extra deck agnostic Darkworlds have been associated with Academia by way of Grapha, Dragon Overlord of Darkworld, a level 10 fusion monster with 3200 attack and 2300 defense, requiring Grapha, Dragon Lord of Darkworld, and any dark monster as material. When your opponent activates a normal spell card, trap card, or monster effect as a quick effect, you can make that effect, your opponent discards a card. And if this fusion summoned card and its owner's control leaves the field by an opponent's card, you can special summon a Grapha, Dragon Lord of Darkworld that is banished or in your grave. Then each player with a hand discards a card. Now, you might be wondering why you'd have to worry about Grapha being banished outside of your opponent's interactions, but we've got a very pushed fusion spell coming up that'll make that very relevant. So, on top of having some massive stats, this card is a negation by way of changing card effects, which I am a huge fan of. And since you get to choose which card gets discarded, you can rack up some major bonuses from the Dark Worlds that gain the extra benefit. And then, if your opponent gets rid of it, you get a slightly smaller monster and a new discard outlet. I'm telling you, this Overlord is going a bit overboard. Alright, all the monsters are accounted for, now it's time for the spells and traps. Charge into a Dark World is a normal spell that targets a level 4 or lower Fiend monster in your grave and special summons it. Then you discard a Fiend card. A nice recovery option for your Dark Worlds as well as any other small fiends you might want to be playing, while also giving you a discard outlet. It's a solid effect, though judging from the art, I'm not sure if they thought it through very well. Dark World Dealings is a normal spell that has each player drawing a card, then each player discards a card. Boy howdy, now if this is a card that hasn't been around the block. Quick and easy card cycling at the cost of allowing your opponent to do the same. In fact, generally, they come out on top, because while both of you draw and discard, only you are giving up a spell in hand to do it, meaning in a vacuum, you get hit with a -1 in card economy. However, this incentivizes you to play this in decks that can use the discard as a way to reach their game plan, be it decks like Darkworld and BA, to less fair strategies like FTKs, looking for just the right card to go off. It's a true classic, but you don't need me to tell you that. You know the deal. Darkworld Lightning is a normal spell that targets a set card on the field, destroys that target, then you discard a card. This is a pretty nice way to deal with back row that hasn't been deployed, or even a set monster. However, the templating is rather unfortunate. Since it says that target on resolution, that means the card must meet the same requirements as when it was activated. And that means if your opponent flips a floodgate you were gunning for, they get to keep it because it's no longer set. And you don't discard, which might be a boon to other decks, but is massively annoying to us. And it's not like you can use it again after that because lightning doesn't strike twice. Cheapskate. Darkworld Accession, that cannot be its name. This is gonna get translated to Darkworld Ascension, just you wait. Anyway, Darkworld Accession is a quick play spell that you can activate during any main phase. It fusion summons any Fiend fusion monster from your extra deck by banishing the materials mentioned on it from your field and or grave. And if you're summoning a Darkworld fusion monster, you can also discard monsters from your hand as material. That's right, when making Dragon Overlord, you can discard Grapha and any other Darkworld. Heck, it doesn't even have to be a Darkworld, any dark is viable discard fodder. This is doubly powerful because this is a quick play spell, so you can drop the Dark Worlds out of your hand during your opponent's turn as interruption, while getting another interruption in the form of Dragon Overlord's first effect. And that's not all, because during your main phase, if this card is in your grave, you can add it to your hand, then discard a Dark World monster. And it doesn't have that usual clause where you have to wait a turn after it hits the grave to use it, so it's another discard outlet. And unlike Dark World dealings, this doesn't cost you a card to use. This is a fantastic addition to the theme, and any list looking to make it to the top tables is going to be making the most out of this card, as well as any random Fiend Fusion monster you can incidentally make off this, and is truly going to lead to the ascension of this archetype. I swear this pun will make sense when it's translated. I refuse to believe it's called accession. Dark World Puppet is a quick play spell that targets up to 3 cards in the graveyard and banishes them. Then you discard a Fiend monster. And during your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the grave, you can banish this card from your grave, then target one of your banished Fiend monsters and add it to your hand. So this is a nice little DD Crow that you can search off of Snow. And considering another painfully powerful Snow that's in the format, this has some very relevant targets. It's also a discard outlet for what it's worth, but we're getting a lot of good ones, so I'm not sure if we need another. This can also be used in a weird way to banish one of your own fiends, then on the next turn you can banish Puppet to get that fiend back to your hand, essentially putting it from your grave to your hand with extra steps. In a vacuum, I don't see this impacting the deck's playstyle. However, with Chiar Elements being as widespread powerful as they are right now, being able to take out a huge swath of your opponent's graveyard at quick effect speed is a valuable tool, especially since you can search it. But even when that's not the case, people are gonna play this just because of the art. Look at that brainwashed little puppy, so happy to sow mischief and chaos. Look at that wacky tail! Gateway to Dark World is a quick play spell that targets a Dark World monster in your grave and special summons it, but you can't summon other monsters the turn you activate this card, but you can set. With no level restriction, this can bring out some big beaters, and as long as you use this sparingly, you won't have to worry about the downsides. This is one of those older cards where the previous templating is actually to our detriment, because this checks if you've summoned before using Gateway as well, meaning this can be your only summon that turn. But if you flip this on your opponent's end phase, you're pretty much in the clear. But before we send anyone through, we've got to double check our coordinates. I don't think we're meant to drop our troops off in the ruined Pillar Land. Dark World Grimoire is a continuous spell that, during your end phase, if you discard any number of monsters to the grave because you had more cards in your hand than your hand size limit, you can target one of those monsters and special summon that target. Talk about a problem that's good to have. It's pretty rare to have to deal with the game mechanic of hand size unless you're up against a stall deck, and even then this isn't really helping you much. Besides, I don't like how wet this book is. It's a very wet book. Can we please get away from the wet book? Dark World Library is a continuous spell, and during your main phase, you can discard a Dark World monster, and if you do, all Dark World monsters you currently control gain attack equal to the discarded monster's level times 100 until the end of this turn. And if any number of your monsters whose original level is Fiend is discarded by the effect of a Dark World card, or an opponent's card, even during the damage step, you can discard a card, then draw 2. Wow! Wow. How did they get away with printing this? The first effect is a free discard outlet every turn that triggers your Dark Worlds because none of it is cost, and it gives your entire Dark World lineup a pretty nice boost. Pitching Snow only means 400, but pitching Grapha means 800. Then, because they were discarded by the effect of a Dark World card, Library, you get to pitch another card to draw 2! This is heinously powerful, and if your opponent sticks this onto the board, you better have an answer for it, because otherwise they are going to go off. But the best part is that we can finally check Grimoire back in, which is somehow even wetter! Please get me away from this disturbingly wet book! The Gates of Dark World is a field spell that gives all Fiend monsters a 300 attack and defense boost, and once per turn you can banish a Fiend monster from your grave as cost, and on resolution, discard a Fiend monster, then draw a card. This was released alongside Grapha and was a huge revelation for the theme. Not only did it put Grapha at a proper 3000 attack, but it gave you a kind of Dark World dealings that didn't minus you and didn't give your opponent a chance to get the same benefit. So it was already really strong, and that's where our new card Genta comes in. Because now we have 3 more cards that can search it, immediately sets up a Fiend in grave because you have to discard it to get the search, which was kind of a problem in the beginning because you didn't have a guarantee of that, and comes comes back as a free body when you use Gate's draw effect, meaning it actually pluses you. And since you can bounce it back to your hand to revive Grapha or Supreme Reign-Beaux, you can search another copy of Gates to replace the one on field if it goes away. Heck, you can even do it in the same turn to use Gates a second time, because while it's a once per turn effect, it's not a once per copy. You know what else isn't a once per turn effect? The one that Genta uses to search Gates. So if you discard them, revive them off the banish, bounce them back to hand for Grapha or Supreme Reign-Beaux, you can search for another Gates immediately, letting you cycle a second time. This card is absolutely huge and is another must-kill card when it hits the field. Otherwise, your opponent will be flooded with advantage thanks to this Gate. The Forces of Darkness is a normal trap card that targets 2 Dark World monsters in your grave and adds them to your hand. This was an original release card, so for the time it was cool to have a way to recur your Dark World so you could discard them again, but nowadays, yeah, not super helpful. I don't feel like you have to force yourself to play this. Alright, now we've got a bit of a lightning round. These cards aren't strictly speaking Dark World cards, but yeah, they're Dark World cards. Dark Deal is a normal trap card that can be activated when your opponent activates a normal spell card. You pay 1,000 life points to change its effect to your opponent discards a random card. I believe this was one of, if not the first card, to implement the idea of altering an effect as it was resolving, which is hella cool. And I'm glad they iterated on that design so Overlord Grapha could fly with it. The randomness of it kinda kills this version, as it can totally whiff and hit the wrong card, unless you've narrowed it down to 1. But its ability to trigger things like original Reign-Beaux was worth the risk. And of course, I can't bring up Dark Deal without talking about Terrible Deal, a normal trap card with the same life point cost and activation trigger, though your opponent can activate any spell card, and your opponent randomly discards a card. It doesn't change the effect of that spell to do that, you just kinda tack it on. Amazing. Dark Scheme is a normal trap card that has both players discarding 2 cards, then drawing 2, but your opponent can negate this effect by discarding a card. Now, you might be wondering why you'd play this over a similar card, Hand Destruction, but that quick play spell sends cards from your hand to the grave, which isn't discarding, because Yu-Gi-Oh! Is an intuitive game with mechanics that just make sense. Anyway, we've gotten a lot better at finding discard outlets, so we aren't so hard up for effects that we need a trap card that might not even resolve on our opponent's whims. I don't know what Silva here is scheming, but whatever it is, they should probably go back to the drawing board. Dark Smog is a continuous trap card that, once per turn, can target a monster in your opponent's grave, and on resolution, you discard a fiend monster, and if you do, banish that target. Oh hey, it's the DD Crow thing again. And while this is repeatable, it is slower by virtue of being a trap card. But unlike Puppet, this isn't searchable. However, until Puppet was released, this was a sterling way to get your Dark World triggers online while acting as interruption to stop graveyard recursion. It also portrays the beginning of Raiko's Twilight Sworn arc, and considering this came out in 2011, well, they've been cooking this thing up for a long while. But, to be fair, it does take a long time to train your dog, so that makes sense. Dark World Brainwashing is a continuous trap card, and when your opponent's monster activates its effect, if you have 3 or more cards in your hand except during the damage step, you can target a Dark World monster on the field, return it to the hand, and if you do, the activated effect becomes discard a random card from your opponent's hand. This card's a mixed bag, not gonna lie. There's no once per turn clause on this card, so as long as your hand is big enough, each Dark World you have represents a kind of effect negation. And there's a possibility that one of your recurring Dark Worlds, beige, silver, gold, all those ones, of putting that monster back onto the board, effectively making the negation free. But keeping that many cards in hand to make this live kind of sucks. Like, you want to be using as many cards as possible to leverage a win, and the only cards you want to keep in your hand are hand traps, which you do not want to be discarding. It's frustrating because I can see a lot of good here, but there's too much bad to give this a wholehearted recommendation. Also, Raiko looks very sad here. I don't like it. Dark World Punishment is a counter trap card that you can activate when any number of monsters would be normal or special summoned while you have a fiend monster in your hand. You negate the summon, and if you do, destroy those monsters, then discard a fiend. And if any number of Dark World monsters would be destroyed by a battle or an opponent's card effect, you can banish this card from your grave instead. Well, I guess that's one way to make sure you never have to worry about a monster you can't deal with. Just negate the summon entirely. It's also searchable off of Snow, which means you don't have to play too many copies, and you'll probably see a good amount of side deck play for when you know you're going first. And even if it gets discarded, milled, or destroyed, you get a little extra protection out of it to keep your board safe. Like, those monsters haven't even been summoned yet. How can we punish them for something they haven't even done yet? Alright, so that's all the Dark World cards, but what do we do with them? Well, we have the makings of a brutal combo deck that ends on some ridiculously powerful monsters that can clean 8,000 life points off its plate and still have room for dessert. The theme has a lot of tools to reach that point, so now we're just looking for the best discard outlets and fiend support we can get our hands on to solidify our strengths while shoring up our weaknesses. So what can we play to help them out? Well, as far as discard outlets go, first it might be helpful to see what we can avoid. Cards like Phoenix Wing Windblast and Karma Cut are powerful, but discard is cost. Instead, try using Paleozoic Dynamicious as your removal trap, because it does discard for effect. Some other cards you might want to avoid, and this may seem a bit controversial, include Card Destruction. It seems really good on the surface. You can trigger so many Dark World effects off this, and get a fresh batch of cards for your troubles. The issue with this, though, is the same as Dark World dealings. Your opponent will get the same benefit, and with every passing year, it gets harder and harder to justify giving your opponent a mulligan while potentially triggering a bunch of their effects. We have a lot of other discard outlets now, you really don't have to worry about it. Same thing with Morphing Jar. Something else that's a bit more defensible, though I'd still recommend you avoid, are Dangers. Which may sound weird because Dangers love discarding. People run Danger Dark Worlds after all. But in my experience, Dangers seem to mesh well on the surface and can cause some huge blowouts, but have the same issues that Gren and Khaki do. Unless you have the right combination and sequencing of effects, you're going to stall out. Bigfoot and Thunderbird can whiff very hard if they don't have a payoff if they get discarded randomly, leaving only Tsuchinoko, Jackalope, and Nessie to pick up the slack. Remember, I'm not saying they're terrible picks, but if you want to focus on a more consistent game plan, you'll want to avoid these cryptids. For a good discard outlet, Drag Down Into the Grave is amazing. You can manipulate it so you only have cards in hand you want to be discarded before activating, and then you'll get a lot of knowledge of what your opponent has in hand. So on top of knowing what hand traps they have available, you can take the ones that clog up your game plan the most. The only wrinkle in this is that your opponent gets to draw a new card that you don't see, which might cause them to draw into a new out, but I think all the other benefits outweigh that. But what about Fiend support? Well, we've already talked about how well Tour Guide works with Brow, but you can also bring in Fiendish Rhino Warrior as well. When its effects are not being negated by Tour Guide, it keeps your fiends from being destroyed by battle or card effect, and when sent to the grave, you can fast track Grapha or Supreme Reign-Beaux. Archfiend Glitch is also some pretty spiffy removal, courtesy of our newfound friends in the Labyrinth. And Foolish is a fiend like Rhino does. Honestly, I'd suggest splashing in a lot of Labyrinth cards since they work with fiends, but you might find yourself running out of deck space rather quickly. Oh, and back on the subject of the members of the Underworld, News Reporter is a godsend. Their protection is nice, but the fact that it revives fiends from grave means you can get back smaller Dark Worlds to use as fuel to bounce back your big level 8s, and fill your hand all at the same time. Its revival effect even discards, as part of the effect. If you want an excuse to run some Fiend tuners, I hear Fabled are really nice ones, Groza, Tyrant of Thunder, is a pretty nice payoff. It's a quick effect that also discards as part of the effect, so that's more effects for you, and it slowly becomes more and more resilient the more fiends you discard during a turn. Grapha and Supreme Reign-Beaux make for some great rank 8 material, but what exactly should we use them for? Well, there are the obvious answers, Dingirsu, Draglubian, the Zombie Vampire, but my eyes are set on the Galaxy Dragons. And I say this as someone who wrote this script before the Photon Hypernova leaks. There's Hope Harbinger, of course, for its spell negation, but there's all kinds of other things you can get. You can turn any Galaxy Eyes into full armor for card destruction, and there's the Cypher monsters because they love stealing things, which you can then use for link summoning. They even made an updated version of Galaxy Eye's Prime Photon Dragon, which has a massive attack stat, but was previously balanced out by the fact that it only did half damage if you were using it outside of its archetype. Now, that is completely out the window. You can make a 4,000 attack monster that can make 3 attacks in a turn on monsters, which is devastating to a board. Trance Archfiend was a cute little inclusion back in the day, though I'm not quite sure if it's as useful now. It's another effective discard outlet that retrieves your banished fiends on destruction, but that's what Puppet is for now. As for a silly tech pick, how about Stained Glass of Light and Dark? Silva makes for some effective hand control, and this takes out even more cards, though it does risk giving your opponent their own discard outlet. However, if you have your own negates and interruptions available when you use this, that shouldn't be much of a problem. You can even get the draw effect too if you're feeling a little quirky. If you run Tour Guide, then turn it and whatever level 3 you summon into Mequipped Engineer. Don't be fooled by its looks, it's a legit light fairy, giving you all the benefits. And that's all I have to say about Dark Worlds. This new wave of support is gearing up to be one hell of a boost, giving them everything they need to hit the ground running going second to OTK, and a few fun tools to keep the opponent off their A game when going first. With all the new power at their disposal, the deck has a world of possibilities stretched out before them. Let's just hope Dimension Shifter isn't popular anymore. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Are Dark Worlds on the cusp of plunging this world into darkness, or do they not oppress the meta as much as they don't oppress the commoners? Let me know in the comments, and if you haven't already, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss an episode, and share this video with someone you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode was brought to you by my lovely patrons, including Quasar Commander Harry, the ominous benefactor, special contributor Gibbles the Gibble, Nebula Navigators 3rd Dynasty, Adam Zajdel, Ashling Waltz, Avi Chali, Benjamin Meisner, Cryptic Gamer, Eric, Frankie, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh!, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Howling Zangetsu, Inblink, Ironic, John Manji, Julius Sneezer, Larakia, Meteornus, Michael Madsen, Mighty Action X, Muzaki Clark, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Ruxith Sarani, The Fresh Prince of Con-Air, The Wizard Moose, True Neutral, Tyler Cranston and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders, Bear Sharktopus Studios, Chaz Ghost, Corbinisms, Cozy Boat 275, Jesus Garcia, Manga Pages, Marion James E. Picata, Nitromo, RGS, Rem T. Bright, Shooting Star 3300, Star-Lord 777, Tyler Martin and the Legendary Raven, as well as the lovely Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. I'm only able to continue doing this thanks to the support of these lovely people, so if you'd like to be a part of these credits, as well as help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, please check out my YouTube membership or Patreon links in the description to see if I have anything you'd like on offer. And if you want to see another deck about dark monsters that love to be discarded, check out this video I made covering Dangers. And if you want to see two Yu-Gi-Tubers going at it, check out Noah Jenk and I's latest series Progression Polls, where your voice shapes the format. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.